What's up everybody, it's Aaron from Aaron Anderson Photography. On today's episode of Behind the Image, we're going to take a look at our shoot with fitness model and competitor Sierra De Grasse. We were on location at an abandoned warehouse and had a whole bunch of cool lighting setups to show you guys. So let's get started. Alright, so before we get going in Photoshop, I want to talk to you guys about the tools that we used. That way, if you're out in the field getting ready to set stuff up, you kind of know what we had and what you need to have on hand. For starters, we have our ever-trusty ELB 400, which this is the Elinchrom battery pack that you can plug 2 heads into. It also has high-speed sync capabilities, and we had the HS heads on it for this particular shoot. Then, speaking of battery packs, one of the things I wanted to tell you guys about was these mini Vagabond lithium-ion battery packs from Paul C. Buff. They're super easy to use and they only cost like a couple $100. So you can plug your monolights right into them, have them on your stands, and just move around. So even if you don't have power, like for instance we didn't have power at this location, you can just plug them right in and you're good to go and can keep firing away. Then plugged into one of those battery packs we had the D-LITE RX 4, and the reason we were using this guy for a lot of the different setups that we did was because of its high-speed sync capabilities. So if you're using the ELB 400, you can use the RX4, the D-LITE RX4, alongside of it, and they can sync up to like 1/8,000th of a second, as long as you have the correct transmitter and all that kind of jazz. But definitely, they're an inexpensive light, and they're a fantastic workhorse light if you're looking for something like that. And then finally, I think it was last shoot that we had these as well. We were using some gels. This one is what's called a CTO, which is a color temperature orange, and you can kind of see, I think, the color. It's sort of a warm yellowish color. If you're looking to mimic sunlight coming in through windows or anything like that, this is a great one to have on hand. And then we were also using what's called a CTB, which is this guy, and that just stands for color temperature blue. And that can really cool off your lights and create a neat effect if you want it to be in a room and make it kind of moody. Give it that sort of cool versus warm look. You can use these two guys. I'll put the link back up down in the bottom so that you guys have a place to click on. I think it's like $13 for 8 of them, and we picked up 2 packs so that we'd have enough to put on. Again, make sure you're careful where you tape them and you turn your modeling lights off, because if you get a gel too close to those modeling lights, they will melt. So, without further ado, let's hop into Photoshop and we'll take a look at these setups for Sierra De Grasse.
Alright team, we made it into Photoshop, and now it's time to start talking about these lighting setups for our shoot with Sierra De Grasse. We're going to take you through 3 images today. The first one is this kind of boxer fighter image. The second one we're going to do is this yoga image of her in front of this really cool old boiler, which I'll tell you about as we go along. And the third one is a really simple image that I just wanted to touch on quickly with her in some smoke and some kind of cool lighting. So for starters, let's talk about this boxer image. I wanted something really dramatic with some contrast, and that's why we use those gels. And this is what that setup looked like. We had her standing away from the wall a little bit, and we had this really cool kind of glass block window over to this side. And this is when these battery packs really come into play. We had the ELB 400 with 2 heads attached to it, both of them with their reflectors and the CTO gels, which again stands for that color temperature orange. The goal of this is to really create that sunlight look, so they're up really high, pointed down and across to show the beams and all that kind of stuff. Then as really what I guess you would call our key light, we had a huge 69-inch Rotolux Octabox, and we had a blue gel taped on the inside of here, so that created that really cool moody coloring that you saw. So now that you've had a chance to see the lighting setup, I wanted to take you back in and take a quick look at this image one more time. You can see at this window over here and that light coming in from the ELB 400s, and then over here you have a nice big blue kind of moody light from the 69-inch Octabox. Something to note, we did have a smoke machine running pretty much the whole time that we were in this location, so that's to blame for a lot of this haze that you see, and then some of it is added in post-production as well. But let's move on to the next image, and that is this kind of fun yoga image. I have Sierra standing in front of this really cool old boiler, and we are actually in a building right next to an abandoned hospital, and this is the original boiler that used to heat the water, so kind of a cool piece of history. Thought it was a neat contrast between the organic kind of movement of her body and the cold steel of this boiler. But without further ado, let's move into the setup on this one. Wasn't crazy different from the one we had before. We do again have the 69-inch octabox as sort of our key light. We had the 69-inch octa up a little bit higher on this one so that we could spill some light onto those really cool bolts that were up on the boiler. But we did take the gel off because the blue just felt a little weird in this scenario. One thing we did add is this 36 by 60 inch silver reflector, and I just had my assistant holding it pretty much horizontally parallel to the model to fill in the light on her leg so we could bring a little bit back. And that is something to know, is that you don't always need to add another light. Sometimes you can just bring in a silver reflector and get the same effect or the same amount of fill that you need just by bouncing the light that's coming from here over back into the model, which is something that you can really do pretty easily. Then over here, and I'm going to jump back into this picture really quick, you can see these the light coming in these beautiful windows. I really wanted to showcase those a little bit and then pop out the outline of the boiler itself. So we brought our ELB 400 pack back around the outside of the building and shot it right through that window up nice and high again to get some of that sunlight feel. And that was pretty much it. Nothing too crazy. Again, had that smoke machine running. Let's move into that. So you can see the haze, all the cool haze that was bouncing around. And that's our yoga setup. So for our final image that I want to talk about today, it's actually our simplest. And I'm going to just touch on it briefly because I want to talk about just going with where you are and the location that you're in. So this image kind of just happened. We weren't planning on shooting this, but we walked into the room and I saw this window and just had to get a shot with her standing in it, which actually has turned out to be one of our more kind of popular and I think cooler looking images. So we had the smoke machine running in here for quite a while, so it was pretty smoky and the sun had just moved onto the side of the building. So I just had her stand in the light and we brought in our reflector. Let's look at that really quick. Again, this is just a 36 by 60 inch reflector. It's on the silver side. One of the reasons I like the 36 by 60 is because it's so tall that you can light almost an entire subject with it. And we're just bouncing this light from this window down here into the model's face. And it's a simple, easy shot that most anybody could do. You don't need any lights at all. I mean, you do need a smoke machine, but it is just fantastic. It's what you can do. And that kind of brings me to my point on this image, is that as photographers, be willing to be flexible, be willing to see light as it's coming in and just use it in any way you can. Again, this is one of my favorite images, and it just came from using a reflector in a window with some smoke behind the model. Just as a note of how we're accomplishing this, obviously she's pretty heavily backlit because we have all this light coming in from here and from here and from here. There's a couple things that are working to our advantage. One is that the smoke is white. So as the smoke kind of wraps around her, it's lighting up, so it's acting as its own reflector. The other is that I have it overexposed, so you can see when you look at this image, this background is almost completely gone. It's not completely gone. I mean, there's still a little bit in there, but we still are almost completely overexposed so that we can expose for the face, because that's the most important part here. And then using this reflector, you can just fill in nice and easy on that face and bring back all the detail that you want to see in a portrait. A couple notes on holding reflectors that I see a lot of people do. This reflector is pretty much going to be parallel and level. Try to avoid taking your reflector and pointing it up at your subject so you're not underlighting their face a whole lot. You can see the shadows on this are moving almost right to left. And I see a lot of people putting it down right below them and casting these huge shadows across their face, which I am not a huge fan of. Even holding it up above them is not a bad idea. We didn't do that here, but holding it up above them a little bit and keeping it parallel is a good idea. Alrighty, team, that is going to do it for this episode. of Behind the Image with Sierra De Grasse. Thank you guys so much for watching. It has been a pleasure making videos with you guys this year. Stay tuned in 2017 for a lot of new great tutorials, both in Photoshop and on location. We'll be finishing up our series on composite imagery and doing a lot more of the behind the image, as well as some Photoshop stuff about how we're actually making these images in Photoshop. Thank you guys again. Please click that like button and hit subscribe, and have a very Merry Christmas. Until next time, be awesome.